This show is a proud member of the Nerdy Legion Podcast Network. Get more at nerdylegion.com. Enjoy the show.
This is Brightside Home Theater.
Hey, home theater nerds. Welcome to the Brightside Home Theater Podcast, the podcast that focuses on the experiences we have in our theaters. And this week, Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, Ultimate Edition, Remastered. A lot to say there, but it was quite the experience. We'll get more into that as we go along. My name's DJ, and you can reach me on Twitter at BrightsideHT, or you can email me at brightsidehometheater@gmail.com, or you can reach me also on the website underneath all of the episodes, all the podcast episodes. There's a place for comments, and you can go to brightsidehometheater.com, and there's also a place for comments underneath all the featured theaters. As I say every week, please leave a comment to those people. They've put their heart and soul into these theaters. They love to get comments. I really appreciate all the comments people have been given. Thank you very much. And we are also on YouTube now, so check it out. Check out the show notes wherever you are. You could, or just go to YouTube and search Brightside Home Theater. You'll find it there, and just please hit subscribe. That would be great. That number is ticking up ever so quickly. YouTube's growing a lot faster than Twitter did. So, but we'll see who catches who, because Twitter is up there, but YouTube is catching up right behind. We are also on Patreon. You can go to Patreon, search Brightside Home Theater, and you will find me there. Or you can just go to the website, the aforementioned website, and click the big red button to donate. So what Patreon does is they will allow you to donate a minimum of $1 up to infinity, and they'll take a little money for it, take the money from you once a month, and then they will give a little bit of it to me and most of it to me and a little bit to them. And we have this week no additional Patreon supporters this week, but we're still hanging tough at 13. Very excited for that. Thank you to all 13 of my supporters. Really appreciate it. So, and on Twitter, we have 3 new followers this week: Ryan Loper, Alex, and James Tucker. Thanks for following along. You're keeping that number going, and it's hard on YouTube. You can't keep track of who joins. Otherwise, I would do it. I only see people if you actually have a YouTube page, so I don't understand how that works, but that number keeps creeping up. So I think YouTube is at like 253 followers, and Twitter's at 309 at the time of this recording. So we'll see, but YouTube's catching up quickly. So everybody keep the numbers coming. Keep it coming. It's a lot of fun. And I appreciate all the comments in both places. I've been told that on YouTube, it's a cesspool, but I'm not finding that. So hopefully, if you don't like what you see, just don't watch it, I guess. But all the comments have been great. I really appreciate all the comments in both places. Great conversations, great questions. Keep them coming. This week, we have no movies or scenes to speak of. A lot of comments this week, back and forth with people, but nobody, at least I don't remember. If they did and I forgot to mention it, or forgot to add it to my show notes, because I add them as I go. For instance, if you said something and you want it mentioned on the podcast and I didn't mention it in a week, send it again and say, oh, you forgot to mention this. I thought this was a cool scene or whatever. Because when I'm out and about, I'll save it. But if I forget to save it and I don't go back later, it gets lost in the shuffle. I'm one man. I'm jealous of these podcasts that have multiple people to help out. But okay, so no movies and scenes this week. And we have no featured theater, which is fine. But if you'd like to have your theater featured, I screw that up every week. If you'd like to have your home theater featured here, talk about the setting, the environment that you've created in your home, you can email me at brightsidehometheater@gmail.com. It can be a single picture. It can be 20 pictures and a description of your equipment and whatever you have, and show me the environment that you've created in your home, and we'll talk about it here. And now on YouTube, I'll be able to show the pictures there as well. So I've changed up the order because let's get to the listener comments. So listener comments this week. First up, we have from Eric Davis on Twitter. Box office, Godzilla vs. Kong nabbed a monstrous $48.5 million over 5 days, giving it the biggest opening since the pandemic began. In 5 days, it topped the entire domestic gross of Wonder Woman 84, and it topped the 3-day opening of Godzilla King of the Monsters at $47.7 million. That, to me, is huge news. The topic was approached all over Twitter this week, talked to a few people about it. I think not only the movie itself, which I haven't really talked about because it came out after my recording last week. I've watched the movie a couple of times already. Absolutely loved it. Let me get to that part first. Absolutely loved Godzilla vs. Kong. I thought the pacing was perfect by the time you get to the end of it. There was a time at the first time I watched it, I'm watching it with my son, and I'm like, they're not going to wrap this up in time. And it was not that it was a slow pacing, but I didn't think it was going to work out. The story was going to unfold quick enough, but it did. And I really enjoyed it. And by the end, the way it unfolded, I thought was perfect. I'll talk spoiler free in case people haven't seen it, if they're waiting to see it at the box office or they don't have HBO Max. But I thought that it was so good that it was, you don't need another movie. It told the entire story from beginning to end. This was the final chapter and it ended perfectly. It doesn't mean I don't want more. I absolutely want more of these movies. I want more giant monster movies. I want another movie. I saw somebody on Twitter put out a timeline like the MCU timeline, and this was the end of phase 1, and then they went on and they titled all the movies and everything, and I thought it was perfect. I was like, yes, do that. I want 20 movies like this, because, and one of the titles in there was King Kong, which we haven't gotten that yet. So that would be, and that was in like phase 3, but I think that would be fantastic if this could go on. But as phase 1, if that's what this is going to be, this is a perfect ending, a perfect wrap up. I will say, I don't know if it's as good as King of the Monsters sound wise. It'll be interesting to see when the disc comes out, because I just don't think that the content is there. There's more story to this one, which there was tons of story in King of the Monsters, but the sound was the story. As I said in my review of that, I don't feel like this one had that, but this one has a great, just great battles, the sound was awesome. The picture was awesome. And it felt a lot like the Snyder Cut. I did say that before, picture-wise, that is. So I felt like the brights weren't bright enough and the darks weren't dark enough. I thought the HDR was pretty good, considering it's streaming. For streaming purposes, I thought it was pretty good. But you can see that everything is compressed in there. It's the brighter images just aren't as bright as they could be. So I'm hoping the Snyder Cut is even better, because without anything to compare it to, I felt like the Snyder Cut was a little dim, but maybe that's what Snyder wanted, right? But now seeing this, where this is a little bit dim as well, it felt like, okay, maybe that's just HBO Max, and it'll be better on disc and brighter. I haven't had the opportunity to see Godzilla vs. Kong in the theater. I do want to see it, but my son got his job and we've been busy, and I want to see it with him. So we will go to see it, but maybe depending on the projector they have there or the system they have, who knows if it'll even be better. But yeah, I thought Godzilla vs. Kong was fantastic. Now, I'm sure I'm definitely going to be reviewing this movie later. And I know I still owe you a double feature. I've been very busy. I apologize. That's the problems with Rob H. knows. Once you promise something, you're just basically going to be screwed, because if you don't deliver, I apologize. We'll be getting to that double feature at some point. I feel bad. But anyways, let's get to Godzilla vs. Kong at $48.5 million during a pandemic. Granted, we're at the end. People are feeling more comfortable. The theaters are opening back up. They're still not at 100%. I don't think even anywhere. I don't know if maybe Texas is open at 100%. But anyways, 48.5 million plus it's available at home. This is huge. This did better than King of the Monsters. And that came out with no pandemic and no competition to itself. There was no Godzilla King of the Monsters on HBO Max at the same time, and it only did 47.7. So that being said, this is big news for the theaters. I think this is huge because it shows that we want to go back. I think there's going to be a huge surge at the end of this year when like the vaccine is out and we're all comfortable and we start opening up. I think there's going to be a huge surge, and then we'll come back down to normal a little bit. People won't go out to see as many movies as I think we're just dying. We're going to have that quote unquote roaring 20s. We're excited to get out there. And I think this is evidence of that with the worldwide box office doing that well, the domestic box office doing that well, and HBO and it being on HBO Max at the same time. I think that's just great news. Great news. All right, I've said enough on that. Let's move that along to Byron Stocks on Twitter, at BrightSideHT, at AVRant_Tom, and at First Reflect. I'm loving these shorter turnarounds from theater to disc. Probably will add this sucker to the collection. Hopefully the dynamic range is a little higher, but overall very happy. Delivered what it was supposed to. Hashtag Godzilla vs. Kong. And he was retweeting a tweet from Geek Gab about Godzilla vs. Kong coming to disc on June 15th. And I'm very excited for this to come on disc as well. I'm not sure if it's much faster because this came out in March 31st. And typically it was a 3-month turnaround. And this is about 2 weeks earlier. That's if you did the math right. So June 31st would be roughly the time. But I think that's about right. I think that's what it was. So maybe it's 2 weeks earlier. But what I think, as I said before, what I think it's great is we've already had it at home. And now they're already putting this out that the disc is coming. And we want these discs. We're dying for these discs. Even though we've already watched it at home. And so I don't think physical media is dead. People want the best quality. We want the best quality. And looks like they're going to keep on feeding us. Keep on feeding the monster. All right. Next tweet from Derek at Echo for How, my buddy Derek. Great podcast with Jeff. Your interesting tidbit about Vigo. Vigo's age was actually just a coincidence. Aragorn's age from the books was 87, took the throne at 88, and ruled for 122 years. And I asked him right away, I said, do you think it was a coincidence as much as they cast for that? And he said, yeah, no, that it absolutely, they cast for that age. And then we had a quick conversation. I can't remember who the actor is because I didn't put it in my show notes. So you know my brain, it ain't there. I don't have it. But they had an actor that was 14 years. Now I remember that he's 14 years younger than Viggo Mortensen. So they recast it, and right before they were about to start production, and obviously the rest is history. Viggo, it's iconic now. You can't even imagine anybody else. So very interesting, very great piece of information there. And the next up we have Steve Ratcliffe at Brightside HD. This is very interesting. Blockbuster, the last Blockbuster special edition Blu-ray, DVD Blu-ray combo. And so if you haven't seen it yet, I believe it's on I did watch this. It's on Netflix, The Last Blockbuster. It's really, really cool documentary about how Blockbuster went down. And there's only one Blockbuster standing, and it is still standing. Spoilers to the end of the podcast. I mean, I knew it before I started watching it anyways. It's in Oregon, United States, Oregon. And it's the last one standing, and there were like 5,000 of them, and it was down to 3. I think 2 of them were in Alaska and then 1 in Oregon. And it's still there, and she's still going. And I say she because the owner is a woman, or the general manager, I should say, and she's managing it, and it's unreal to watch this and think of like what it was like to go to a Blockbuster, what it was like to go to a video rental store and pick out your movie, and just the feels that you get from watching this and growing up. And I think it's hard to think that home theater wouldn't be where it is without Blockbuster, without video rental stores. Especially the early ones before Blockbuster existed. It's like it gave everybody the idea, like, wait a minute, if I can get this movie here and take it home, maybe I could recreate this environment. And that's how I started, by renting movies and wanting to recreate that. If we didn't have that outlet early on, who knows, and I mean, eventually I'm sure we would get there, but the video rental idea in the stores, it just, watching this movie was just a lot of fun. And I think I'm going to be getting the movie on disc. My wife said you probably don't need that, but I kind of think I do. So shh, don't tell her. All right. And at Brightside HT, hey DJ, what's your take on this new Batman v Superman Ultimate Edition 4K remastered? Is it worth picking up if I already have the original release, or no? And that comes from Justin Van Camp at Justin_2005. So Justin, this podcast is for you, buddy. I had been wanting to do this movie. I wasn't sure if it was going to be in. So obviously you tweeted at me last week, and I gave you my response there. And then when I knew I got my notifications from Amazon that it was going to be in, it wasn't supposed to be in till the end of the month, but I found out that it was supposed to be in on Monday of this past week. And I was like, okay, it's going to be here. So I hedged my bets. I didn't do any other movie. And I'm like, I'm going to watch this and do this podcast. So I've been at it since Monday. This, as I record this is Wednesday evening. So we will see. But Justin, we will get to that in a minute. I have some emails to talk about. I got some emails from Carl. Carl sent an email about 10 commercials made famous by directors. Great article. That will be in the show notes. Carl also sent Austin Film Festival will be in person this year. Great news. He's very excited for this. And let's see, Ilongo. Let's just go with that. He writes, hey, hope all is well. So this is why I find the show another great use of my listening time. You can always start your emails off like that. You're almost guaranteed to get them read on air. So anyways, he says, I've heard you mention on the show Godzilla, that, and this. And I remembered the Kong Skull Island review. And last week I listened to the Godzilla King of the Monsters episode, and you raved about the sound mix. So I checked it out. Probably would not have for some time if you hadn't talked about it so positively. Enjoyed it a lot. While I had to listen to it on 2-channel setup, it's at the top of my list to rewatch when I finally get myself a new home theater. Don't ask me when, LOL. Too many other big house projects take priority. But more than that, checking out Godzilla King of the Monsters made me realize that Godzilla 2014, which I need to rewatch now, and Kong Skull Island, which I really enjoyed, are all part of Legendary's Monsterverse. To be honest, I am not a monster movie diehard, but I do enjoy a good monster film, and the first 3 in the series have been well done and enjoyable. So now I'm looking forward to more, and will for sure be seeing Godzilla vs. Kong. And can say I'm enjoying the direction Legendary's taking with this. Peace, Ilongo. Thanks, Ilongo. That is awesome. Thank you very much for the compliments. And yeah, I love, like I just said, I love where this series is going. Hopefully they do more with it. But like I said to everybody, like I said on Featured Theaters, it doesn't matter what you have. It's the environment that you're creating. You have 2 channels and that's what you can enjoy, but you're aspiring to more, obviously. And you just got something to look forward to. And I think if you haven't seen it already, I think you're really going to enjoy Godzilla vs. Kong. And you definitely have to rewatch, King of the Monsters in full surround sound, because like I said before, it really is something that the sound is the story. The sound is the story. Carl also sent an article, Kaleidoscape offering a discount to Sony projector owners, but not like myself where I already own a Sony projector. You have to get the new Sony projector, which is $20,000. The cheapest one that this combination is offered with. You get $3,000 off a Kaleidoscape if you buy a $20,000 and up projector. So the people with the money that can get all that stuff get to save the money, but the people like myself that can't afford the stuff, we're never going to get there. Someday I'll have a Kaleidoscape, or they'll be made for the masses. Anyways, but it's good. They're offering a sale to the wealthy. It just seems weird. It's like, I don't begrudge the wealthy at all. I'm not one of those people. I mean, you work hard for your money, you get your money, whatever. But it just seems like, it's all right. Anyways, but compared to other people, this entire podcast, everybody listening here, we're probably in the higher end. There are people that wish they were us. So I'm not jealous of that. I just think it's funny. It's like, I'm going to offer you some savings when you don't really need it. It's not really selling the item. All right. Let's see. Oh, he also sent an article. Sorry about that. Stewart Filmscreen releases the Acoustically Transparent Harmony G2. This is a pretty cool article. I'm not a big fan of acoustically transparent screens. I have a Stewart Filmscreen. It's not acoustically transparent. My screen before that was acoustically transparent. And at 1080p, my projection guy was like, it's not that big a deal, but you're losing a little bit. And then when you read this article, and I will put this article in the show notes, but if you read this article, Stewart even says the great thing about this acoustically transparent screen is it takes care of some of the bluing effect that can happen with an acoustically transparent screen. And it helps with the higher end, that it can filter through the higher end sounds, that it filters through the speakers. And I was like, see, that's why I ended up going away from acoustically transparent, because when I first built my theater or when I first put up my screen, I wanted those speakers behind, just like at the movie theater where the speakers are behind. But once we went to 4K, and you get into, now we're getting into the nitty gritty and stuff, and you're talking about the picture and being just right, and you're going for perfection at that point. Why do you want little holes in your screen? Why do you want to weave? Or why do you want something that's going to be detrimental to your picture? And also now through the other side, to your sound, when you can set it up appropriately, just putting your speakers around it and getting at least then you have the best picture. So I'm not a huge fan. I've done both. I can say that, but I'm not a huge fan of it, but I do understand it. I mean, if you want that bigger screen and you're willing for and it is such a small sacrifice. I know that. But I'd rather just do it. I'd rather set it up the way I do it. But for that real theater environment, acoustically transparent is awesome. I did it for years, but Stewart Filmscreen is actually, they're improving their pictures. So way to go. Check that out. Let's see. Oh, and G. Cornell. Great conversations as always, buddy. We talked about trailers this week. We went back and forth talking about the Top Gun trailer, and he actually asked me, do I enjoy trailers? He doesn't. He doesn't like to enjoy them at all. Like he tries, not that he tries to avoid them, but he'd rather just enjoy the movie for the first time with zero knowledge and just let it wash over him. I completely can appreciate that. Absolutely. I'm of the mindset of like, I love to get as much of the trailers as I can. I think the MCU has made an art form out of their trailers. They're actually using the trailers to kind of lead you in a direction That way you're thinking a certain way when you see the movie, and then bam, they'll flip it around on you because what? I thought in the trailer they did this, but now in the movie it's completely different. And I think that's fun. They can pull the Lucy and pull the football out from under you by leading you in a direction in the trailer. Not everybody does that, but I still love the trailers. One of the advantages of the Zapedi, like I told to G. Cornell, I said, I can load those trailers onto my Zapedi and watch them whenever I want. And that Top Gun 2 one, I've watched multiple times, at least once a month since last year, since I got the Zapedi, really. I actually downloaded that trailer and tried to play it through my Panasonic with a stick, with a little drive, little thumb drive, and it didn't work. So I was excited when I got the Zapedi. I think that's one of the first things I did is I put that into it and I was like, oh, wow, it works. And it looks fantastic. And it's, I think that one's in 5.1, but it is in 4K and it looks fantastic. So I love trailers. I love pretty much anything. If I want to play a trailer I want to set it up so that I can play trailers before the movies I present, even though I have it shut off that I don't have to play the trailers. Look at that. We're going backwards. So, all right, let's move along then, and we will get to the topic this week. Here we go. We've all seen this. Popcorn's popping. Let it go. Let it ride, because here we go. We're getting into Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition versus Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition Remastered. See how they did that? They're really clear when you're looking for the labels. So I enjoyed this movie. I know people have problems with it. I love superhero movies. I love these movies. I have a lot of fun with them. My buddy John, he loves them as well. A little more critical of what they did with some of the characters. He's educated me on this. I was oblivious. I understand Superman's supposed to be infallible. He's supposed to be perfect. He's supposed to do everything right. Didn't bother me that he does things wrong, whatever. But okay, I love what Snyder is doing here. It's a different take. People can have different takes in the comics. I don't see why they can't have a different take in the movies. So I really enjoyed that. So with that, we get into this remastered version, which I think helps buffer into the Snyder Cut. Okay, so we have the first movie, we have Man of Steel, then we have Batman v Superman, and then if you were going to right away, going into the Snyder Cut, which is supposed to be the correct cut, that is, now you have this movie in the middle, which has the black bars on the side in a few of the scenes. And we're going to go over those today. That's what we're going to talk about, because I actually found the sound to be slightly more dynamic in the remastered edition. I thought in the original 4K Ultimate Edition, I thought it was great. It's fantastic. But when I went back and forth between the two, I don't know what it was. I can't put my finger on it. If you probably would say it's not any different, that's fine. I felt like it was slightly different, which I don't know. That could be me. But I thought the picture was better in Batman v Superman across the remastered edition. I thought the picture actually was nicer. The tones are different. We're going to see that when I get into some of the pictures, when we get into some of the scenes that we're going to talk about. But the tones are different. But I thought the gradation was nicer. I thought the detail was nicer. Maybe it's just the way the HDR worked in the remastered version. But overall, I enjoyed the remastered edition more than the original Ultimate Edition. This is going to be hard to go back and forth with. We're basically going to go with, 4x3 and, 16x9, whatever stretch. I think it's 239 to 1 is the original edition. So, all right, let's get to that, and we'll get to the first scene here, and let me pull up my notes on the timestamps here. So the opening scene in the Ultimate Edition, in the remastered version, starts off, well, in the regular version, we're going to go, each scene that we're going to talk about here through this entire rest of the podcast, each scene is going to go from the Ultimate Edition to the Remastered Edition. Okay, so this is the extended version of the movie, which is the Ultimate Edition, and then we're going to talk about the remastered version. So in the opening scene, which starts at 0 minutes, and then goes on for 5 minutes and 7 seconds. So we go to the 5 minute and 7 second mark, and that entire opening is now in that new 4:3 format. Okay, so the first scene that we're going to talk about is at 1 minute and 58 seconds. And it's the scene where Thomas Wayne is holding Bruce back. And until I saw this scene, I didn't know, call me stupid, maybe you're like me and what I'm about to say is going to be news to you as well, but I didn't know, I never noticed that Thomas Wayne made a fist and then started to swing at the shooter. Okay? If you go now, on YouTube right now, I have the original, the Ultimate Edition up, but now I'm going to go to the Remastered Edition. The Remastered Edition puts the fist about a third of the way up into the screen. It's as clear as day that he makes a fist. He's holding his son, and you can watch him make that fist. And then as the scene progresses, you can actually see him start to swing even more. Now, going back and watching it again in the Ultimate Edition, I did see that entire scene is there. It just doesn't grab your eye like it does in the Remastered Edition. It's crazy. It's go to the 158, and I labeled it fist. All of this will be in the show notes. All the timestamps are in the show notes. You could see it. If you get the Ultimate Edition, you'll be able to see him make that fist as clear as day. That was shocking to me. Very shocking. I never noticed that before, because that also takes me back to the Christian Bale scene when he's like, oh, with Liam Neeson, and Liam Neeson's like, your father didn't do anything. Is that kind of a scene. And it's like in this one, in, Zack Snyder's version, his father did try to do something. His father tried to swing, and maybe that's why they got shot. But that was right out of the gate, changed my perspective of this scene here. But let's move it along. We'll go to 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 27 seconds, the pearls. So right here is where the pearls are wrapped around the back of the gun. All right. So the gun is being pointed at Martha. He's close enough, and the gun is cocked in the back. The trigger, or the hammer, is back, and the pearls are on it. The image that I have on YouTube is you're looking at visual effects supervisor John DJ Desjardins is on the credit is on the screen, and the pearls are stretched out across the screen. But if you go to the remastered version, it pulls it in tighter, and it makes that gun more prominent on the screen. And I kind of liked that. I actually liked it a lot, because if you go back to the other version, it kind of plays out nice, because in the standard version, it goes and stretches those pearls across the screen. But the focus here is supposed to be the gun, not the pearls. And when you look in the remastered version, that gun is very prominent, taking up that side of the screen, and then the pearls are just kind of there. So I really liked that one. I thought that was a good example on why the 4:3 works. At 2 minutes and 36 seconds, Martha. This is where now we're looking from the shooter's perspective. We're looking at Martha with the pearls still around the gun, and it's kind of a close-up on her face. But if you go to the remastered version here on YouTube, and you can see, it's just, you now see the shooter's hand. He's a lefty, and it's just a more dynamic image than if you go back and look at the original image. It's darker. It doesn't look, a big difference. Here you can see the tonality has changed as well going between the two. It's like in these, I've grabbed these shots pretty much from the same timestamp of each. It's difficult to get, some of it was off by like maybe a half a second or a second for some reason in each one, but they're pretty much the same shot. But you could see that the remastered version is much brighter. Obviously it's a warm tone, but I liked how dynamic the remastered version looks. That taller image where you could see further down and above Martha's head, whereas in the Ultimate Edition, the first version, you're cutting her off at the forehead. You don't see the gunman's hand. It's not the same. Not the same. I find this much more dynamic in the remastered. Moving to 3 minutes and 14 seconds, we get Martha's eye. So this is where we get the close-up as she's dying, and her pupil dilates and opens up all the way. And it's a very dramatic close-up. And then you move to the remastered version, same close-up of her eye, but now we see more of her cheek. You see the blood splatter on her face. You see more of her eyebrow. It's just a huge difference. You still get that the eye is still the correct size, but now we've opened it up, because even on your screen, like going back and forth here on YouTube, you can see that like it looks like the eye is getting smaller, but if you are in your room, that eyeball is still pretty much the same size. Whoops, went the wrong way. That eyeball is still the same size. It's just a taller version of that same scene. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the 4:3. I know a lot of people don't. And I was very surprised. I was very skeptical. I will admit that I was skeptical that because of the different transitions in aspect ratios, I wasn't going to like it. But I really did enjoy it, because clearly these were meant to be shot this way. This was meant to be shown this way, I should say. So he shot it with this purpose in mind. So let's move along to the next one. So now we're getting into the next scene, which is the alternate reality. So we're done with the opening scene. That ended at 5 minutes and 7 seconds. Let's go to the alternate reality scene. Now, this is the next section where we get more of the 4:3. And the alternate reality starts at 1 hour, 4 minutes and 50 seconds and goes to 1 hour, 9 minutes and 18 seconds for a total of 4 minutes and 28 seconds of alternate footage. Okay, remastered footage. And the first scene we get is this scene here, the Scorched Earth scene. And it's Batman looking out over Darkseid's symbol carved in the earth. That, you have the explosions going on in the background. But when you go to the remastered version, I think the tone is different. You see those explosions, you see ships over them, almost a la District 9, looks like. Batman is slightly smaller because now it's more of a grand scale. I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well, a little bit more of that. I think if you go back, the regular version, this scene, you'd think this scene would play out like a Lord of the Rings type scene where you get the nice landscape, but I think it's way more dramatic when you look at it in the 4:3 aspect in the remastered scene. And like I said, this Scorched Earth scene is at 1 hour, 5 minutes and 9 seconds, if I hadn't said that yet. So I thought this was really good. I thought the tone was slightly lighter. It's still a yellow tone. I thought the new remaster version had more dynamic range to it. It was brighter. And Batman looks darker, but it's probably because he's smaller and it's just less detail on him. Especially if you go back and forth here on YouTube, like I'm doing, you can see it's like, I really like this image a lot better. And I see what Snyder was going for here. And I like that. So the next scene is, chains. We got the wrong image here. Change scene, chains. Hang on a second while I get my images on YouTube. Boom, ba-doop, boom. There we go. That's the image I'm looking for. So the first image, we have Batman, and he's chained up. And this is at 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 12 seconds. So Batman's chained up. There's a guy on either side of him also chained up. And very reminiscent of like maybe Jesus on the cross with somebody on either side of him. And Batman bigger than the other two, more prominent. But in the original version, he's just lit in the back. You know, there's a door behind him in the background, silhouetting him in a way. But when you go to the remastered version, you see the beam that he's chained to. It's a much more dynamic picture. You see way more over his head. You see more down by his feet. The bright floor, the bright light coming through. The light almost like the way it's not his cape, it's a trench coat. The light on the trench coat is completely different. It's such a completely different scene. You can't tell me that this is not a more dramatic scene, a more dynamic scene, just because you put the bars on the side instead of at the top. And I said this on Twitter. I've said it to a few people. I've done the math. We get the same amount of projected image, whether it is a projector or your television. If you put the bars at the top and the bottom, or you put the bars on the side, you get the same amount of lit screen. It's the exact same square inches, just however you want to divide it up. So you can't tell me you get more the other way. You just get a wider. This one, you get a taller. And I think I'll do a little bit of a, segue here, or tangent, I should say. I think the mental part is we were brought up in home theater by thinking bars on the side meant cheap. That meant television. We, as home theater fans, spent the money to get the bars at the top and the bottom. So it's in our heads that we need to have bars. If we're going to have bars, we need them at the top and the bottom because that to us means quality. But that's not the case. Okay. Quality doesn't mean good. Quality is just a definition of what a level that something is at. So to us, this is just, we think that when we see the bars on the side, we think in our heads, we think we're watching old 1980s and earlier television. Or we're getting the cheap version of the movie we're getting the pan and scan instead of the widescreen. But that's not what Snyder is doing. And like I said, back in the 90s, Cameron shot his stuff in 4:3 because he wanted to lean in to that when he went to VHS. He wanted people to be able to get a little bit more of an image. So I think as home theater fans, we have to get that out of our heads that bars on the side is bad. It's just another tool for the artist to use. Personally, I want 16:9. Why can't everybody do 16:9? Because I want my full screen loaded with picture, right? That's what we want. But when they put bars on the top and the bottom, we don't get mad. But why are people getting mad that they put bars on the side? I'd get real angry if they put bars on the top and the bottom and on the side, and you put this little tiny screen in the middle, and then I have to use my projector to zoom in. But why is one better than the other when they're both taking away part of your screen? So I think it's that idea that it's just a mental hiccup that we have because we're so pre-programmed to think that bars at the top and the bottom mean quality. That's the best. And that's not the case. It's not the case. That's not what defines it as quality. And I think this movie and I think the Snyder Cut is evidence of that. I won't say it proves it because it's up to each individual's taste. But for me, I think that it's a great tool that he used in his artwork, and I really enjoy it. And I hope more people do it because in this scene here with Batman and all tied up, chained up, and you get a much more dynamic image here. And even if there was something in where those black bars are, who cares? What's over there? The image you're supposed to be looking at is Batman chained. So who cares what's over there? So even those black bars actually do help focus. And we'll see more on that in a second. Moving on to the next picture, we have the tunnel. Superman's coming down the tunnel. This is where he just landed, and he's walking down that hallway tunnel area to get to Superman. He's about to kill the people on either side of him with his heat vision. But you go to the remastered version, and it gives you more of that tunnel vision. So you get, it's a narrow tunnel, and watching him come down that hall with the bar, and now we're in the 4:3 aspect ratio, it just gave you that more of that tunnel feel. You felt more closed in. Why would you have a widescreen, that's what it is with bars at the top and the bottom. Why do you have a widescreen in a narrow tunnel? So I felt like this was a much better feel, a much better image, and closer to the source material on what it would be like coming down that tunnel. So moving on. The next scene we get to is actually, it's Batman v Superman. When we finally get to that battle, that takes place at 2 hours, 2 minutes, 58 seconds, and it goes till 2 hours, 10 minutes, and 22 seconds for a total running time of 7 minutes and 24 seconds. Almost the entire battle is now in the 4:3 aspect ratio. The first scene we're going to look at is Look Up in the Sky. It's at 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 5 seconds, and it's looking up past Batman's shoulder to Superman up in the sky. And when you go to the remastered version in 4:3, I think it's a much, like, you could see higher over Superman. Superman gets slightly taller. I think it actually shows depth of field, a bigger, larger depth of field here, because you see more further down the back of Batman, and you see a smaller Superman in the sky. And then when we go to the next scene at 2 hours, 3 minutes, and 6 seconds, we get puny Batman, which is literally the next scene. Now we're behind Superman looking down at Batman. And in the standard version, in the widescreen, it's a nice scene, and you could probably argue it should be here. But when you see it in 4:3, that depth of field changes completely. Superman, there's more space over Superman's head, and Batman actually gets smaller. So, like, because of the new aspect ratio, you're further behind Superman, looking past Superman to Batman. So that puts Batman further away. When you go back to the widescreen version, it's like you're closer to Superman's shoulder, and now that brings Batman in. Flipping back and forth between these two on YouTube, I think that's what superhero movies are supposed to be like. They're supposed to be this big. It's supposed to be this dynamic. This image is just, it's so much better. To me, it's so much better in 4:3 when you go back and forth between the two. All right, let's move along. The next scene we have is, this one here is to scale. Now, this one, maybe you could make an argument that it should be in the widescreen format. So we see the first image. This is at 2 hours, 4 minutes and 48 seconds. I labeled it to scale because I felt like the new image the remastered version gives it a more accurate version of the scale of this scene. And it's when Superman has taken Batman up through the building, and now we're looking down at the building with the spotlight shooting on them. And in the widescreen version, because much like Martha's Pearls, the spotlight is shooting across the screen, which stretches that image, which is really nice. But then when you go to the 4:3 version, now Batman and Superman are still up in the sky. We still get that entire image, but now you're further away from the whole thing. So it just feels like it's like you're higher up and you're looking down on this grand event that's going on, and Batman and Superman are that little, but they're causing this much damage there. It's just going back and forth between these two. It's a tough one for me to say which one should be used. But I also think the tone is different. I think the HDR here is different. They did a little burning on the edge, which we'll get to in a little bit in the remastered version. But I think the HDR here is slightly better. I think the tone is better in the remaster version over the brighter, more, it's just a little bit more washed out in the widescreen edition. So, all right, moving along to next scene. Next scene here. This one here is in the it's the same Batman v Superman, so same part of the movie. It's at 2 hours, 9 minutes, 49 seconds. And I called this one composition. I could have called all of these composition because they're all the composition of what you see on the screen. But this one here I thought was a really good example of how it changes. The composition on the screen changes completely. So this scene here is when Batman is dragging Superman. He's just, tied him up by his feet and he's pulling him off of the pile. And it's a nice picture, but when you go to the remastered 4:3, the scale, the composition has changed completely. You see that big window in the background that Batman is walking towards, and you just get a larger sense of depth here and the scale of the scene that they're in here, or the building that they're in, how large of a space that they're actually in. And when you go back to the other one, everything, you lose the entire window in the foreground or background, I should say. And, Batman and Superman are slightly larger, but when you go to the remastered 4:3, you get way more image, and it's Batman and Superman centered on the screen, a line down the middle. That's where your eye should be. You don't need to be focused on anything that's off to the left or the right. So there are bars there. It doesn't matter. This one here, it really focuses your eye. There's a line in the window, a brighter line, and it's telling you, look down here, that's Batman. It's just the way this image flows. It just is a lot more dynamic. And I've been saying that a lot. Moving along. Next, we get to the epilogue. So I called it the epilogue because it kind of was the epilogue, but then we get a break and then we go to the ending. So, but for the epilogue here, that started at 2 hours, 41 minutes and 17 seconds, and it lasted to 2 hours, 50 minutes and 35 seconds for a total of 9 minutes and 18 seconds. Really, really long period of time. And then it like I said, then we get another 1 minute and 11 seconds after that. For a small break, we go back to widescreen. But anyways, I felt like this, between the epilogue and the ending, this was the transition to the Snyder Cut. If you're to watch these movies back to back, if you happen to have an extra 8 hours and you wanted to watch these two movies back to back, you could, that's what it would take. But I felt like that would be the transition right there for, you get a little bit more of this 4:3 as this movie goes along, Batman v Superman. Then when you get to the Snyder Cut, you're going to get, wow, okay, now we go right to the 4:3, I think that's part of the transition here. So the first scene we're going to talk about is the Daily Planet article, and it's at 2 hours, 42 minutes and 45 seconds. This is as evident can be, clear as day. It's like looking at this thing through Superman's glasses. They're fake, but, or through Superman's eyes. He's got great vision. Go to the 4:3 version of this, the remaster version. You get the whole article. It's ridiculous. It's like you jump back and forth between the two. You're like, you barely get the title. It's so the article is Daily Planet reporter Clark Kent killed reporting Gotham battle, and the Daily in Daily Planet is chopped off at the top of the screen. And you can't make out, and never mind the bottom of the article, you can't see it. But when you go to the remastered 4:3, you could see the entire article. You could see Perry's hands. It's everything. It's all there. And actually freezing this on my screen, you can actually make out the image is so good. You could probably read this entire article. You can make it out. It's pretty good. So big difference here, jumping back and forth. It's crazy. definitely check that one out. If you have both copies of this movie, definitely check this scene out. Absolutely. Next scene we move to is 2 hours, 45 minutes, 58 seconds, Burning. This is one of the negatives that I didn't like what they did here. And there's no flipping back and forth. This is a 4:3 remastered version. And what they did is, I called it Burning because it's like they burned the edges, the corners, to give you more of that scope look. And at this exact time stamp at 2:45:58, you can see this. And it's when they're in Smallville and they're burying Clark. And the funeral procession is going through the cornfield, and you could see on the top two corners, it's darker. So they're trying to create like a circle image to what you're looking at, like almost like you're looking through a scope, right? And they did it a few times in the movie, and I wasn't a fan of it. I would have preferred them just to keep it open and not burn those edges, because when you go back and you look at the widescreen, there's no darker edges there. There wouldn't be. So I don't know why they did that, and I'm not a fan of it, but that's the one knock I will say on the remastered version. So, but we'll move along from there. That was the only knock I had. The next image is Two Heroes. It's at 2 hours, 48 minutes, and 34 seconds, and it's Bruce and Diana at the funeral, standing next to each other. And this is much like the newspaper. You look at that difference. You just go back and forth, go to this timestamp, and Wonder Woman, they get smaller, but they're grander. It's more, you could see over Bruce's head, or Ben Affleck's head. You can see more in front of, actually the same amount, but now you get more over Diana's head. It's just going back and forth between these. It's like Bruce's head is cut off in the widescreen right in the middle of his forehead. And this is one of those things where you say he definitely shot this in 4:3 and then cropped it for the movie, because it's the same amount of screen in front of Diana, open screen in front of her in the remastered version, but now they just literally took the bars away from the top and the bottom. It's completely and just a much, much more dynamic scene. All right. Moving on, 2 minutes, 50 seconds and 50 minutes and 33 seconds. This is just we're focusing on Batman here. We're focusing on Bruce Wayne, which is Ben Affleck's face. And in the first one, it's fine. And if you look this is where Diana's walking off in the distance, walking off to behind him. You can make her out in the standard version, the widescreen. You can make her out on the right-hand side. She's a blurry shadow walking away. And the focus is right on Bruce Wayne, Ben Affleck's face. But then you open up to the remastered version, and now you can see the top of his head. You can see it. You still see Diana over to the side, to the right, but it's just much more focus on him. There's no need to even see either side. This next movie, they're leading into the Snyder Cut, into Justice League, where Batman is taking the responsibility. He's bringing all these people together. That's what the focus of the movie is going to be. It's going to be on him doing his job. And I felt like that's what this scene was. Both of these scenes portray it. I just felt like the remaster version really shows his full face. I also thought it was slightly darker, the remaster version, which I think is that darker tone. In the regular version, it's a brighter, if the images that I had, it's a brighter, like more daylighted tone, if that's a term. So I like the remaster version. I love the full likeness of that. He takes up that entire screen, top to bottom. And that's the other thing. You have to imagine these pictures, even though if you have a 65, 75, that's probably relatively small compared to what these are supposed to be on, like a giant screen, not even a projector. I'm talking like at the movies on IMAX and a giant screen, and how big his head would look and how ominous that would be. I just think that's what it was meant for. moving on. Now we get to the ending. So this scene here is much like that Daily Planet article. Here we're at the 2 hours, 53 minutes, and 32 seconds. It's the painting that we talked about that they had talked about earlier in the movie. And they're showing the FBI coming in to, gather Lex's stuff. And that painting now has been turned upside down, which is right side up, and blah, 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 whatever. But in the standard widescreen version, you can't even see it, the whole painting. You just get a part of it, and this is literally pan and scan in reverse. You're panning and scanning to get that image in there. But in the remastered version, you see that entire painting the whole time, and then they focus in on the fact that it's been turned upside down, right side up, whatever you want to call it. Completely different image, completely different meaning, because I feel like, well, it's not completely different, but I feel like it nails the meaning in the remastered version, because now your focus is coming in, you're looking at it, you're like, is that a little different? But you could see the entire painting, and then they move the camera into it to get that close up. It's really night and day in this scene here in particular, just much like the Daily Planet article. And again, the ending, like I said, is 1 minute and 11 seconds long of 4:3. It started at 2:53:29 and went to 2:54:40. And the next scene is 2:53:51, and it's Smallville Cemetery. And the first time you saw this in widescreen, why is DJ calling it Smallville Cemetery? Well, I'll tell you why. Go to that same timestamp and look at it on 4:3. You can see Smallville Cemetery written across the top of the gate, which never shows up in the widescreen version. Never showed up. So because you even have to get it, like when I grabbed this screenshot, you have to get it just after it goes, the camera pans up and you see Smallville Cemetery and the line goes just above that top bar. And then we flip to a scene, I believe it's of Wonder Woman, of Gal Gadot. And so you only have a split second. Well, in the widescreen version, they do basically the same thing. They pan back, but it never gets that high, because obviously you have to keep Bruce Wayne in the shot. And otherwise you would be panning and scanning to get the scene up, to get the Smallville Cemetery sign in. So again, much better. Still gives that same effect, that big open field, cornfield with the path going through it. Very dynamic scene, very dynamic shot, and you get the entire thing in there. Big difference. At 2 hours, 54 minutes, and 38 seconds. Handful of dirt. Very emotional scene. This is pretty much the last scene of the movie. Much like the tunnel, it gives perspective of being in that dug out grave. So we're looking at the dirt. This timestamp is right before the dirt's going to rise off the casket, giving us all hope that Superman will rise again, like we didn't know. But when you look at it in the remastered version, it's just, it gives you that closed-in feeling of being inside that grave and looking at that. It's like, so you're just focused in on that dirt, you're focused in on that scene, and you have the side walls are closing in on you, as opposed to the widescreen version of everything going on. And it's, you're just seeing a widescreen version inside a narrow grave. Doesn't really make sense to me. So it was great when I saw it, but now seeing it this way, it's nicer. I think this is nicer. So, what did you think? Those are all the scenes. My summary, I think it's worth getting. This is the Ultimate Vision. It's called the Ultimate Edition. It should have been the Ultimate Vision, but I think this is Zack Snyder's Ultimate Vision. I think it's worth owning, because if you enjoyed the movie the first time, it's worth getting it the second time for these 4 scenes. It's basically 4 scenes. We have the opening scene. Is it 4 or 5? The opening scene. We have the alternate reality, Batman v Superman, The epilogue, it's 5. And then the small 1-minute ending with the different aspect ratios. And I think the aspect ratios help tell the story here. So I really enjoyed it. My recommendation is to get this movie, is to own it, especially if you're a completionist. You definitely have to have it. But if you're on the fence and you're not a huge fan of the movie, then obviously you're probably going to be a little disappointed because you're going to be like, well, huh. But if you're into that nitty gritty, if you like to pay attention to the artwork, to the environment, if you're listening to this podcast, that's probably what you like anyway. So that's why I can say I would recommend getting it. I don't think you would be disappointed in experiencing what Snyder wanted you to experience. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I think it's worth the risk. All right. That's it. That'll do it for this week. So thank you. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for listening. This week we have thank you to my 13 patrons, and thank you to Ryan Loper, Alex, and James Tucker for joining me on Twitter. And if you want to reach me all week, you can always reach me on Twitter at BrightSideHT, or you can email me at thebrightsidehometheater@gmail.com. Go to the website, leave some comments underneath the shows or underneath each of the featured theaters at brightsidehometheater.com, and go to YouTube and subscribe. That would be a lot of fun. That would be great. And don't forget, now you can get t-shirts on TeePublic. I was supposed to feature that. How did I miss that? Oh, well. Oh, wait a minute. Let me see. I'll do it here at the end. What a shame. Let me see. Where did it go? There it is. Here at the end. If you're still listening, this was supposed to be at the beginning. TeePublic. You can get all of these t-shirts. And you could just get the standard t-shirt, which is just the home theater logo on the chest. Nice and big. That's what I'm wearing right now. It's a long sleeve. You can get, I chose navy blue. That is the standard, but you could pick any color. But then I put up a few others, which has a small logo on the chest. And then on the back, it has a larger logo with a quote underneath. And there's one quote says, "Go ahead, make my day. Ask me about my home theater." And then the other quote is, "I'll be back when I'm done in my home theater." That's written on the back of that one. And then the third version I have is home theater is crossed out and it says COVID bunker. So on the chest, so Brightside COVID bunker. So you can go to TeePublic. You can support the podcast by checking out any of these t-shirts, buying a t-shirt. I get very, very small amount, but I really appreciate that. And if you were to purchase one of these, send me a picture of you wearing your shirt, or they have pillows. Pillows are great. I have a bunch of pillows in my home theater from a bunch of other podcasts. I think they're awesome. They're great sound absorbers. You can stack them in the back of the room to absorb sound. But yeah, they have all sorts of things there on TeePublic. So you can check out all of those things. And it helps support the podcast, but it helps brand the podcast. People will ask you, where did you get that? What is Brightside Home Theater? And that's how we grow. So I'd really appreciate that. So that'll do it for this week. I meant to do that earlier, but if people are still listening, all right, cool. That'll do it for this week. Batman v Superman. I recommend it. I recommend you push play on that. Everybody have a great week. I'll be back next week with who knows what, but I'll be back. Go push play. Hey, Fred. This has been a Hey Fred production with theme music by Jeff Bernhardt and Throne Vault Productions.